Hey guys, I wanted to bring you a crazy, eerie, odd, mysterious, tragic story. What's been great is there's a lot of stories I heard around the campfire as a kid prior to the internet that you just always wondered like how real they were. I mean, you knew that they were real because somebody read them in a newspaper or it was documented somewhere. But over time, the stories kind of get lost and there's just a lot of ins and outs and stuff like that. And you eventually kind of history forgets about these things sometimes. Nevertheless, what's been great is a bunch of YouTube podcasters and stuff. I mean, there's at least three or four of these stories from my childhood that people told around a campfire or just to kind of raise the hair on the back of your neck, stand up. And what's been great is just, modern day YouTubers are keeping these stories alive. And I think there's a lot to learn from them. And this one is very tragic and it definitely gave me some perspective on a few things. And if you don't have a strong stomach or you can't handle tragedy, well, don't listen to this one because this one's very tragic. So the 1992 film Candyman, which was kind of like filling the role of, we just came off of Freddy Krueger and Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees. So Hollywood kind of needed a new scary man. So this Candyman picture got started up, and it wasn't. I watched it because they hyped it up with the commercials and stuff. And so when it finally came out on tape, I got my parents to let me rent it, and it really wasn't a very good film. I can vaguely remember it, but it just wasn't. It wasn't like those other like slasher films and stuff, but it definitely is. I'm glad they made it, and I'm glad it definitely serves as a kind of a beacon for the real story. The real story of Candyman is much scarier than anything Hollywood could have ever done. So if you ever seen the 1992 film Candyman, it starts off in Chicago housing projects. I remember that for sure. I mean, that's the opening scene of the movie, and I do remember that distinctly. And the premise of the movie is you say, Candyman's name in front of a mirror 5 times in a low-income housing building, and you get attacked by this paranormal entity, this ghost that kills anybody who summons him. So that's the Hollywood movie. Let me tell you where Hollywood found, like more or less came up with this story. So this is the Albla housing projects in Chicago. These are considered at the time, like the cops were called here, murders like 3 times like really awful. I mean, I until I listened to the actual report on all this, I couldn't imagine that these places were quite that bad. Yeah, so Albla housing projects, and if you ask me, I bet that stands for all black living area. And consider, these folks escaped the South or whatever injustices they had in the South just to meet up to these pandering idiots in Chicago to house them in places like this. So Ruthie McCoy was a 52-year-old woman who lived in these housing projects and had to deal with the chaos on a day-to-day basis. She constantly was calling the police. She had definitely told the police about numerous murders, crimes, just horrible stuff that went on in here. So 52-year-old Ruthie lived in one of these apartments, and the way that this housing project, 17,000 people lived in here. So try to imagine that. Like, imagine living in a building with 17,000 people. In these housing projects, I guess the maintenance for easier access would use the pipe chases in between the units and had access to units by removing the mirror off the bathroom, pour the duvet, whatever you want to call it. You're in front of your sink, you have a mirror. So, through the pipe chase in between the units, you could pull the mirror off or take the cabinet off and step right into a unit. So Ruthie, who was not, you know, the police were familiar with Ruthie. Ruthie had called on numerous occasions, but the last time the Chicago police ever heard from Ruthie, they thought she was crazy because she said, "Hey, they're trying to come in through my bathroom through the oh gosh, that's one of the through the cupboard, where you keep your medicines. They're trying to come through my, and like the police just thought she was crazy or whatever. They dispatched police to Ruthie's. She told her the address, and Ruthie even said, "Hey, the elevator's working," because a lot of the times that crap was like not working. But she actually informed them like, "Hey, at the moment that the elevator's working, you can get up here relatively quickly." And they got up there, they knocked, they didn't hear anything. The police didn't want to be sued, so they went away. And then after 4 or 5 days and nobody seeing Ruthie and somebody finally taking notice, the police are dispatched again. I think they meet with the maintenance, and the maintenance opens the door for the police. And there they find Ruthie shot 4 times in her own apartment, and the killers had come through the bathroom mirror, through the whichever was in front of either a cabinet with a mirror on, whatever. That's how they gained access, and then they slipped right out. And they even rumored to come back and have cleaned up some of their, because they knew that law enforcement didn't make it in or whatever. And ultimately, two gentlemen were charged and brought on trial, and they had some stolen property that they had stored in their girlfriend's apartment in this same building. And they didn't get, the jury did not find them guilty. So still to this day, nobody knows who Ruthie's murderers are, and it's just like, it's such an old, I mean, you guys can't tell me, it's just not the craziest thing you've ever heard. And you can't imagine like apartments were kind of standard back in the 80s, 90s and stuff. And people, I'm a kind of a modest person. I live in a small area, but you would never expect to be attacked in your living area, somebody crawling through the mirror on your bathroom sink. So it's up for a lot of debate whether this inspired Candyman or not. I'm going to go ahead and step out on a limb and say, yeah, it did. And maybe they had a more dramatic script going, and then they just converted it into a horror film or something. There's rumors that John Malkovich wanted to make a story about Ruthie in the night. I mean, there's definitely, you can go down the rabbit hole on it. I don't think any of that stuff's important. I think what's important to take from this is, another YouTuber said it better than I can ever say it. Like, the things you're trying to escape, I mean, it's just, I just have so much empathy for people who get caught in these, like government gives them a handout and pretends like they're helping them. And then the next thing you know, you're in the worst spot you could ever be. So yeah, just a rough story. Here's the, like, you look at this hell. Can you imagine? This is in the, not like when it was last in operation. You can see these old 90s Chrysler vans down here that were par for the time. And this is the building. You can see where somebody had a fire or something. And just awful, man. Definitely makes me feel very fortunate about, where I grew up and stuff, and the fact that, you just weren't subjected to this. So, and then guys, Chicago is still a horrible place to this day. And my grandparents were from Chicago, and they didn't touch on it too much. But at the time, like, I'm going back to the 80s and 90s, Chicago and New York were kind of the center of the world and this and that. And you felt like if you lived there or something, you were, I mean, at that time, growing up in Texas, I looked at the people living in Chicago and New York as if they might be more important or something, but definitely not some place people are dying to get to these days. And it's always had problems. My grandparents, my grandfather was from Chicago, old Democrat from Chicago, and he did not like the way that they went about things up there. And I'm sure that stuff like this had a lot to do with it because where I grew, we have low income housing. I've seen low income housing between here and the Tetons in Wyoming, and it varies greatly. But we didn't have any where you jammed, 17,000 people into a filing cabinet, and then didn't have, I mean, we could talk about the pipe chase all day. Obviously, the people in projects up to nefarious things are going to exploit every little thing they can find. So just a tragic story that inspired the 1992 film Candyman. I remember this being talked about when I was, God, before that movie came out. I mean, my parents were realtors, but they also had contracts with government agencies like HUD to go do inspections on buildings and stuff like that. And I remember them talking about this and just how, like, I mean, it definitely makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up for sure. It's a creepy story. Here is Ruthie McCoy, and that's, can't talk about this story without showing a photo of her beautiful face, and and I just what a tragic story. Here's a photo. Here's a rendering that somebody made. That just kind of defines it all. Yeah. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and these housing projects in Chicago were like a marble stone laid by, pandering Democrats and just, awful, awful stuff. All right, catch you on the next one.